I'm Matthew Kerbis, the subscription attorney, and this is Law Subscribed, your dedicated source for all things subscriptions and the law. Thank you to my sponsors. See links to them in the show notes. Everything discussed is only for educational and entertainment purposes. Enjoy the show. I'm thrilled to have with me today Damien Weinstein and Brian Klein of Weinstein Klein. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Also excited to share for those who are really interested in watch the video that I'm recording through a new platform. So you might actually be able to see some of the wrinkles that I'm starting to get. So, thank you both for being willing to be in super high quality video on this.
You're very welcome. Like we said before, we're sorry that it's us to be the test pilots.
You didn't tell us about the wrinkles part. Otherwise, we would have said no.
Well, I'm excited to have you. Like I said, Damien, you and I have had a chance to talk pre-interview, so I've learned a little bit about your firm. But just for the audience who hasn't come across either of you or your practice yet, Damien, at first, maybe you want to say hello, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, then we'll follow Brian, and then Brian will be learning about the firm.
Absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, my name's Damien Weinstein. I am the Weinstein Klein. I am a recovering former litigator, whatever term you want to use for that is now focusing as fractional general counsel for small and mid-sized businesses with a real focus. My practice area, Brian will mention his in a moment, my practice area being more on corporate transactional work. So a lot of business counseling, a lot of contracts in, contracts out, and most importantly, especially in the past year or two, buy side and sell side M&A.
And I'm Brian Klein. So I am the Klein, Weinstein Klein. My background is employment law and litigation. So I have worked my entire career representing management, as we call it in the business. It is the employer side of employment law. So it is a lot of advice and counsel with respect to all things related to employees, contractors, employment law, traditional labor law. And it's really just walking those clients through employment issues, HR issues, and helping them as best we can stay out of trouble. And I also litigate. I've been a litigator my whole career. And so those two things work really well together, trying to keep these employers out of trouble, sometimes despite their best efforts.
Yeah, I litigated for 8 years, and let me tell you, I'm happy to be out of it.
I think I'm one of the only ones that enjoys it. But that's a separate story over.
Oh, I had fun. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed it, but we'll get into it. But before that, so then Brian, you'll start us out, and then Damien, you could fill in any of the gaps. What was it that brought you two together?
Damien's wife. And let me explain, because there's much more to that story. I have known Damien's wife. She's my oldest friend. We've known each other since we were about 5 years old. And we went through elementary school all the way to college together. So we were at UMass, and that is where Mary Ellen met the love of her life, Damien, through a mutual friend. They fell in love, and then the three of us all became friends and have just remained super close ever since then. We officially crossed this year the half of our lives mark. We've known each other for over half of our lives. And a large part of that, while we were both attorneys, was spent just complaining about how much we did not like where we were at in our lives with our prior firms. And about 5.5 years ago, we decided to join forces and try to do things a little bit better with a little bit of a different model. And that model has evolved a little bit over time, but the core principle has always been representing businesses, giving them excellent advice with a particular focus on employment, business, and litigation needs.
Did you get that right, Damien? Anything to fill in there?
He got it right, although he usually makes a joke about him having like a bowl cut or a mushroom cut haircut, at the time that
So the joke is we've gotten older, not taller.
Yeah.
That's right. And slightly less hair for all of us, I think, unfortunately.
Now Mary Ellen says
She's doing all right.
For what it's worth, you said my oldest friend, and I'm thinking, how old is she? But it's what you say. Do you say my longest friend? Well, then, like, how long are they? It's hard. Language is funny.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the model. Begs the question, what did you have in mind when you got started? And maybe even a little bit like, how did you even know? Because at the time that this will be publishing, there may be some other episodes about actually launching a law firm or running a law firm in 2025. So I'm realizing that it was, 5 to 6 years ago. Like, how did you even manage to do that? Like, how did you know what to do? Where did you go? Like, what resources were available? Because that's a question I do get a lot. And then why you wanted to do things differently and how you started to do that. I'll let either of you
I
tackle
can
this.
pick up a little bit. I mean, the short answer is at first it's just hustle. The original invoices were just a Word document with, some template that you copied and pasted. You go to networking events, you reach out to anyone and everyone that you can. The office was your desk in my, studio apartment, and then it gradually got to a slightly larger thing where Damien and I, there's a great picture in what our first office where we were closer, I think, than the pictures I see right now with us as far apart. Like, we would just be able to touch each other. One of us insisted on a large printer. It was me. It was stupid, but I felt like we needed a printer to be established. It's just hustle. It's just doing whatever you can to make ends meet and continue to get clients and always just do great work and meet people and leverage your relationships and leverage your contacts. And slowly but surely, you make those incremental changes and you keep making those changes until you are in an office where you can actually sit at your desk and touch your partner from your chair.
Yeah, and I would
Hey,
just
well,
add to that. I mean, we made a lot of mistakes early on, but they were all pretty minor mistakes. In retrospect, they were all minor mistakes, and that's kind of the beauty of it, right? Like it didn't kill us, it didn't set us back. But we always say we when we launched, we didn't know how to run a firm, but we pretty quickly learned how not to run a firm because we would try something, it didn't work, whatever the mistake might be. So that was one big part of it. And then the other part of it was, this is true. I know we're going to get to it in terms of kind of implementing a change to your billing practices, the subscription model or flat fee or whatever it is that someone out there is thinking. Someone else has done this already, right? Like we're not the first time two guys decided to leave their jobs and start a law firm with very few clients and have to hit the ground running. People do this every single day. And a lot of people are successful when they do that. So finding those people and literally just asking all the dumb questions that you could possibly imagine. I mean, anyone who had done this and started a law firm who was willing to give us 5 minutes of their time, we would take it. And it goes back to what I was saying. Most people made mistakes, and so they can't teach you the secret recipe to how to be successful and how to grow and scale. But they could at least say, "This is what I screwed up on." So if you see yourself going in this direction, abandon ship, go somewhere else, go in a different direction.
I think it's an important thing, particularly to your point, Matt. If there are going to be other episodes, and some of those are about starting a law firm and things like that, do not be afraid to reach out to people. To Damien's point, not only did people talk to us, they were happy to talk to us. And I mean, we're not old hats at this point. We almost 6 years. So we've been around for a little bit. We're growing. We get asked those questions and we're happy. So we understand why there's something about being an entrepreneur that is just you want to help those people. And when you recognize someone else that has that it factor or has that itch, there's a really rewarding thing of wanting to help them and literally saying, "This is what I screwed up. I'm happy to tell you the things that I got wrong. You do it the way you will, but I'm happy to talk to you and help you however I can." It's an amazing thing. So do not be afraid to ask questions.
100% totally true. And also, don't be afraid to ask people who are not lawyers who own businesses because you could learn some things from them that lawyers don't know who have businesses unless they listen to this podcast or guest on it, right?
One of our standard lines is a core value of ours, maybe not a core value, but a mantra is that we aspire to be a good business, not necessarily a good law firm. We want to be a good business. And that is in large part because most law firms and lawyers are bad businesses and business people. And so, listen, if there's something that a great law firm does for a business perspective, we're happy to do it. But we are always trying to model and improve upon and learn the things that good businesses do, and not necessarily things that good law firms do.
Well, it helps when businesses are clients too, because you can learn things from your clients. And I know I have.
Oh yeah.
And we're
Oh
and
yeah.
we're small firm and we're small business owners.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, well, they obviously don't teach business models in law schools, except they kind of do now, like a little bit more. Like I've been doing some guest lecturing. Like there are some programs out there where they do teach about the business of law. So it's happening more and more, and actually on the East Coast more than I think anywhere else.
Thank
Um,
God.
and so I don't even think you said where you guys were from, right? So maybe let people know where you're from and where you practice.
Excellent point, Matt. You must do this for a living. So our main office is in Morristown, New Jersey. We both live in New Jersey. I am proud to say that I'm born and raised in New Jersey. Damien over here is from Westchester, New York, but main office is in New Jersey, and we also have a satellite office in Manhattan.
Okay, so good. So we got that established. I did used to do a lot of depositions back when I was a litigator, so I know how to fill in the gaps if we need to. The very happy former litigator. How about that? Recovered. I'm going to say recovered
How
There you go.
litigator.
That's the word.
covered.
Yeah, yeah. So, so they don't teach you about the business of law or how to even like a business model, how to make money. So, naturally, when I got out, I just didn't even think about it. And then when you start to think about it, you start to realize, oh, like I could kind of guesstimate what this firm is bringing in revenue versus what I'm being paid, right? And you start to like that's what first got me interested in the business of law. And then what got me even more interested was when I had to build my time and then got totally sick of that and needed to find a better way. But for when you started, like, what was your experience? Were you billing hours at the previous firms before starting your own practice? And did you think about doing anything different when you launched, or you just figured, "Oh, we were billing, and so we're gonna keep billing?"
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I mean, when we started, launched June 1st, 2019. So not too long before the pandemic, but we were all hourly. Maybe there was a one-off thing that was flat fee, a specific project, especially more on the corporate transactional side. It's maybe a little bit easier to do that for contract type of work. Although you could do it for obviously employment agreements, independent contractor agreements, severance agreements, things like
Handbook.
that. But we were, 99.9% billable hour. Why? Because of the same reason that everyone does it. That's just what you do, right? That's what, when you're a lawyer, you're the billable hour, you do the billable hour, right? That's what we all know. Going back to what Brian said, we try to operate like a business. So a big part of that is don't do something just because that's the way it's always been done. But talk is cheap, right? And we all know this. I mean, we said that and we dreamed very early on about something other than the billable hour, something other than tracking every single hour that we're doing. But I think a lot of people, you're caught in the momentum of billable hour. It's complicated to change things, or you think it's complicated to change that up. So we carried on and we got momentum. And it probably wasn't until, I don't know, Brian, if you remember exactly when, maybe it was about 2 years into being in business. It was the first time we were introduced to a client. And the client said in the first call that we ever had with them, the introductory call, I want to pay a flat monthly fee. And I remember very clearly having that conversation that was like, well, that's interesting because yeah, that would be amazing. But we just assumed if we would want it, the client wouldn't want it, or if the client wants it, we wouldn't want it. So this works. And we are still working with that client on a month to month basis, and they have a monthly fee that they pay. They get their services. That was kind of the first aha moment, and obviously it took some time to kind of gain confidence in that, build out the model, build out the service offering, again, roll it out, make some mistakes, bring it back in, tweak it, present it again, screw some other things up, retweak, rinse and repeat.
Was that your experience too, Brian? That's how you recollect that?
I Damien's much smarter than me, so maybe he picked up on things I didn't. To me, it was just all right, cool. This guy wants to give us money, so let's do it, and it's something first day of the month, and that's great. In hindsight, a lot of I think the insight and aha moments transitioning to a subscription slash monthly retainer model did not come until honestly, very recently.
Yeah.
But it's significantly different being an associate and trying to just get as many hours as you can on that sheet. I heard a great line from a colleague the other day. It's essentially billable is vanity and invoice is sanity. And I thought that was so great, especially when you are the owner and you're hearing it from the clients when you send an invoice out and they're saying, why did it take this long to do this? Or Damien and I are having that conversation saying, we have to cut this time because there's no way we can pass this over to the client. And you keep getting these moments. And to Damien's point, just because something has been done the same way consistently doesn't have to be the case. And probably in many ways, those are the things you should be looking at the most to change.
And you could just get rid of it entirely. Like, I haven't looked at an invoice, and do you know how long? Like, it's all
Right.
automated.
Yeah.
Like, I don't negotiate it. Clients can click to unsubscribe. I did that before the FTC required it. I just wanna put that out there, right? Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot to be desired with my current tech stack and the customizability of them being able to do that, right? But that makes me wonder then how when you got this first client that wanted to do the subscription, and I mean, look, folks have called it different things. They've called it membership on this podcast. They've called it a monthly fixed fee. So I mean, we call it whatever we want. I like to call it subscription. Feel free to call it monthly retainer. Although retainer, that's got some baggage with that of like
Mhm.
what that
Right.
actually means, right? A true retainer versus a retainer you bill hours against. So, so whatever we call it, like, how did you effectuate it? Did you just invoice like you were invoicing at the end of the month, but now you're invoicing at the beginning of the month and you just processed it the same way? Did you start looking into tech to like automate this? Like, what was that decision process like?
Yeah, I
You
mean,
got
we
it?
yeah, I mean, it really I mean, the first one, it wasn't anything fancy whatsoever, I'm trying to think, I know what we do now, but back then, it was first of the month, auto withdrawal from the person's bank account, from the client's bank account. We have monthly standing meetings and obviously check-ins throughout that, and obviously doing work throughout that. And then at month end, we probably in the beginning, I'm trying to think, we still put together a detailed invoice, is my guess,
Mhm.
and sent it to show the value. And in that case, it was good. We could talk about that too. There are months where the client wins. There's months where the house wins, so to speak, based on what the volume of work is that given month. So there's a pro and con, I think, to sending that detailed invoice, even when you have a subscription. Um, but it all roughly evens out in the end, which is nice. And obviously it's meant to be a win-win. But there really wasn't anything fancy to it. It was really like Brian said, we've been doing that and we've added some more clients over the past 3 or 4 years, call it. And then really in the past, I would say like 6 or 7 months is when we started to really roll this out full steam ahead, gotten more interest in it, more clients signing up. And we're constantly, I mean, we're very, as you can hopefully tell, very kind of open books with this. I mean, we are asking clients for feedback. Are you liking the service? Are you getting value out of it? What's changed? What would you want to change? What wouldn't you want to change? What could we do better? Anything we could do different? And sometimes it's related to the services. Sometimes it's related to literally how the invoice is presented to them on the first of the month, and nothing is too small, nothing is too big to kind of address that.
Yeah, so something I found that you reminded me of is for the higher volume clients that are paying a higher monthly subscription. I actually took something from my old insurance days when I was doing insurance defense work, which is with every invoice, you send like every 30-day invoice, you send like a report that
Mhm.
you, of course, bill for, right? Like you bill for the time to draft the report. Like, I wouldn't love doing that. And now what I do is I hop in the tool that I use to edit this podcast and I record and I have a list that I go through and I record a quick video and I do like a monthly report. Okay, here's the things that I worked on for you this week. So they know that they're getting
Yep.
their subscriber benefits, right?
Do you include in that anything that you're doing like upcoming?
I have, yeah. So like here are things that I've worked on for you that are just kind of sitting there. We're not we're waiting for the other side to get back or whatever, or we're waiting to see if anything blows up or if we if everything went smoothly, if they responded to our cease and desist, letter, whatever it
Right.
is. So those are on that list too of just like projects that are sitting there and that because really they're on there in the sense of, hey, it might come up next month. Because I also want to remind them, hey, we've got all these things in flux. So
Yep.
don't forget, let's keep
Yeah.
paying the subscription every month because here's a bunch of stuff coming up. And then what I also have, and this is a relatively recent innovation, even for me within the last 6 months of recording date, and that is put things on there that are overflow. So like I do a certain amount of projects. They're at their capped limit of projects. Even if they get half of the projects, frankly, they're getting the value. So like I try to set it up where I don't track time at all. And we'll figure out whether you are still or not. But when you stop tracking time, there is no house wins or they win because it's just about getting the quality work done as quickly as possible and turning it around. Right. And so I don't count time. I just count projects. So I have, okay, you hit your cap projects, but if next month these things don't come up, your negotiation playbook, we're going to work on your contract playbook. We're going to do a different playbook for this or that. We're going to do an audit of your employee handbook. We're going to whatever it is, right? Like we have all these extra projects that we could eventually get to, just so they also have a clear idea that I know their business, I know what's happening. Here's what could come up in the future, and I don't actually say it outright, but this is why you should stay subscribed.
Sure.
I mean,
100%.
Sure.
So it's such an interesting. Damien and I we call it the impressions problem.
mhm.
It's taken from one of our clients who does PR, and in PR this is the law of the land. You do monthly retainers, and that's it. Um, and I remember we were thinking about this, and PR has such a leg up on something like a law firm. Every month they can say, I got you this number of impressions on your website. I got you into this periodical. This interview was killed. This is what we're planning on. And it's such tangible things that allows someone to say, oh, this is the value that I'm getting and why I should stay. Like, what the hell am I? Employee satisfaction from an HR perspective is up 7% based on my proprietary system of interviewing people. Or, we saved you from these 17 lawsuits that could have stopped something. We're doing this government. It's like, it's such a different level of, I, I know that I'm helping you. I hope you know that I'm helping you, but I can't hit you with something as clear cut as your impressions are up 5%, which is just a tangible thing. And so, just like what you said, the thing that we're landing upon is give them a summary. We can do that. Give them a summary of everything that we did. Give them a summary of everything that we did, and give them a preview of what's in the hopper to just keep the momentum flowing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just I was gonna say, just adding on to that, the what's in the hopper is so fun too, because, and this goes back to kind of a fundamental thing about switching to subscription. I mean, so much of a lawyer's uh, time spent is reactive, right? The client reaches out to you with an issue, the client reaches out to you with a contract they need you to review. The best way to be a lawyer and a partner, especially with what we do as fractional GC, is to be proactive, right? Is to reach out to clients and say, you should be thinking about this. I want to start talking to you about this, whatever the thing may be. And so it's hard to do that at the billable hour, right? Because clients are going to think that you're just reaching out to them to buzz up work and bump up your billable hours. But when it's all subscription, it's sincere, and you can say, these are the 5 things that we have planned to do with you this quarter. We're going to hope to get to all of them. Obviously, things are going to pop up. Maybe we, readjust the schedule, but it's a sincere kind of thing to do, I think, to let clients know these are all the things that we have for you. And most of the time when we send that report, we hear something back like, that's great. I've been thinking about that. I didn't know if we should be doing something like that. That's something good. I'm glad that's on the radar. And that right there is, that's the value add.
th-
Follow up
th-
with them before they follow up with you.
Absolutely right. It's easier to be proactive for them when they know they're not being billed, and for you when they know they're not being billed.
Right.
Exactly.
uh,
Exactly.
and what you said, Brian, about the summary thing, I think this is why I love doing this podcast, right? Because I kind of know these things, but I don't know that I know them until I'm talking to somebody about it. Which is also a shout out to Legal Mentor Network, where I'm a mentor there, and just mentorship in general. I do it through the bar associations, right? Mentorship helps with that too. But just having these types of conversations. So think about when you are when you're describing that on that invoice, like point to on whatever cryptic way you have to think about, like how to phrase it so that they don't argue with it. And then they're reading it and they're like, this isn't English. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, what the heck? And then you give them some legalese to explain.
That's the nice thing they say. This is in English. Sometimes they say it's bullshit.
Right, right. So like, but now, like, you're just doing a summary of the work, and if you're taking good notes, and I don't even have like that level of sophistication. Like, I have Google Workspace, so it's all private. They're not training Gemini and any of this stuff. I just have like I put a date when as soon as I start working on a client thing, I put a date and I take notes underneath there. And what you could do with a Gen AI type software is you could just take your notes and say summarize this at an 8th grade level. I mean, and that's like a simple prompt. You could say, I'm a lawyer. I want to send a summary of the things that I worked on, the last month. And you just copy and paste your notes, give it the prompt. My client is a CEO of an X size company, redraft these. And it's not going to hallucinate because you tell it to only focus on the notes, right? I mean, you don't want to use a free model. Like I would use Paxton because that's the primary AI tool I'm using. And that's legal specific. It's not training underlying data. It keeps things at a separate instance. So cross client stuff and is all separate and all that, right? So with all those considerations in mind, I mean, that summary is done in an instant. They're going to read something they understand,
Mhm. Mhm.
and because they already paid at the front of the month, they paid.
Right.
This is the summary at the end of the month. So that when the automated invoice comes in for the next thing or the automated charge, they don't
Yeah.
say, well, did I use those services last
Right.
month? So I don't even do it like that, Brian, but like I just came up with that on the fly based on what you said with the summary. And I think that I think instead of even me Some people like the video recording because they can watch it at 2 times speed, they can watch it multiple times, but I do think, like, just a written summary like that might even save me time from doing the video recording. So I do like the personal touch, but for different clients, they want different things.
Yep.
Our clients suffer enough with our representation. We don't want to burden them with a video of us too.
So then let's talk about it, right? So you're pivoting. You've only been really leaning into subscription, for the last six or so months that you said.
Mm.
So like, what has been that mental process like? What have been some ups and downs? And I'm here. I mean, subscription therapy. Let's rock and roll.
I'll start. The biggest down is incredibly the lack of interest that we see from clients that would so desperately benefit from this, that would actually, it would save them money, and they're just not interested. And just trying to navigate this whole situation of overcoming, particularly with current clients.
Mhm.
I don't know how else to say, you will benefit from this and I will lose money. And it's just, not, we're good.
So, okay, well, let me address that first. And then, Damien, you could also air your difficulties. The way that I've explained it to clients, institutional clients that have paid billable hours
Mhm.
before, and sometimes the CEO or whoever the decision maker is on board, obviously, right? Now, granted, with subscription, and I don't track time and I've never billed, but I have gotten some questions from some people in some to this take, whatever. And the way that I explain it is more valuable for me to get, it is more valuable for you to get something faster for me. And so by not charging by the hour or tracking my time, I'm able to get you work product or results faster. And so that is more valuable for you in that regard. And another thing that I've explained is because I don't actually track my time at all. I think there are some benefits to when you're transitioning, and I've come around on this from billable hour to subscription to still track your time, but you're tracking it in a sense of ho okay, that took 2 hours. How do we make it
Mm.
take an hour, right? How do we make it take 30 minutes? And then eventually there's diminishing returns and you stop tracking. But you could tell somebody, you could explain to them block time to do things. I know it doesn't always take the full time, and sometimes I have to block additional time. Like, if I was tracking my time on this, or I am tracking my time on this, like, give him an example, like, and we were billing X amount an hour to get this thing done. Like, this thing took so long, it was more than your monthly subscription. That doesn't happen every month, but that will happen sometimes. But we don't bill extra because just having the security for us as a business owner of recurring revenue, that's valuable for us, that we don't need to maximize our profit from you for every little piece of work that we do, because having that recurring revenue means more as a business owner. And it's an easier sell when they have some version of a subscription product or service as well, because then they totally get it. So I don't know if your clients maybe offer some version of a subscription in some regard, but if they do, then you also say, just like your such and such service or just like your such and such subscription helps you with the recurring revenue, that just knowing that's there. Sure, you could double the monthly subscription on that, but then you might lose customers and you're just happy to have
Yeah.
the thing. So you could always bring it back to that. So those are a couple of ideas for you, Brian. Damien, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it all makes sense and it's there. And we've got a nice pitch to it, and it focuses on the value. And we talked before about, some months the client wins, some months the house wins. It's really, that's kind of probably the wrong way of putting it. That's focusing on what is the hourly rate and what are you paying for your monthly subscription. And then
If they stay subscribed for 2 more years,
exactly.
you made way more revenue than just trying to get as much as you can in that small instance, even maybe not intentionally and perfectly ethically, but then they might not come back to you, or they might not bring you more work. Because what's great
Yeah.
about the subscription model is when they don't not afraid to contact you, they bring you more work, and
And
then they
that's
stay
it.
subscribed, and for years. Lifetime value. That's lifetime value for you.
It does, and that is part of our pitch is that, because we have some clients who are on the lower end of what their spend is with us, and we're very blunt about it. We say, "Listen, in the beginning, you will spend a little bit more than what you're currently spending on average." We'll look back at the last 12 months or whatever it is, but you're gonna be hearing from us a lot more because, 1, we have to prove ourselves, right? I mean, we really have to make it worth it. We do not want buyer's remorse. I think, and it hasn't happened yet. We are very fortunate, knock on wood, that someone signs up with us and then drops off. And we think part of that is because we have to try a little bit harder. I know that's not the best way of putting it, but we kind of do. We have to prove ourselves. We have to be more proactive. We have to reach out to them. The more we reach out to them, I think the more our clients say, "Oh, this is actually pretty good and this is pretty helpful." you know what? I've got something else that I wasn't going to run by you. Can I run this by you? And we get it. And half the times we say, how are you not going to run this by us? This is exactly what we're here for. And it's, that stuff is worth its weight in gold because that's usually we're seeing when it clicks. And it takes a couple months, and we tell our, the prospects we're thinking about signing up with that give it 2 or 3 months. Let us show you how this works. You're not gonna, go broke signing up for this thing for 2 or 3 months. You're gonna get a lot of value from it. And I think usually by that time frame is when they realize, like, we're talking with you a lot more. You're constantly sending us stuff. You're constantly thinking about us and going above and beyond. And just to continue with that for a second, I mean, it also, with the trying harder, it's fun because the more you work with clients and you're able to do that on a subscription model because no, you're not on the clock and the client's open to it, the more you learn about their business, right? The more you learn about their business, the more you can help them, sure, as their lawyer, but you can also start thinking about other things, right? Like introductions
Yeah.
that maybe they need. Maybe they need someone who's an advisor in this thing. And you wouldn't have known that unless you spent 20 hours or 30 hours working with them that month and got to know them a little bit better. Really
You're also monetizing the time. Just real quick, jump in. It's an interesting with the networking. You're monetizing that time now, whereas you wouldn't have been doing that before.
Yeah.
Right. Right. You're incentivized to go out and get more business. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Something that came to mind when you're speaking, Damien, is not something I've had to convey to one of my own clients yet, um, but something that might help you, in particular, since you're working with the management, with the employer side of things, is maybe you explain to them that when they work with you on a subscription, you are a team member,
Mhm.
but you're kind of like a part-time team member. So it's more personnel spend than legal spend. Like if
Mhm.
they're allocating a certain amount of budget to legal, that was on an hourly basis, but now you're personnel. You're not, and you're not even you're not an independent contractor. I mean, you would know better than anybody, Brian. You're like the classification to say that you're not actually a thing because you're a law firm. They're retaining the services of a law firm.
Yeah.
However, the way that they're interfacing with you is more like a part-time worker.
Yeah.
You're not in their business every single day. One of the things I was on a podcast where I was being interviewed and they looked at my 2,500 a month package, so 30K a year for an employer, and they're like, that's less than minimum wage. Like, so they're getting you in their business and you're their lawyer for less than minimum wage. And sure, I'm not working for their business 40 hours a week. Like they don't have those, no small business has that amount of legal needs. But for less than minimum wage, they could have an attorney that's on their team.
Yeah.
And
It's
that's
cheaper than that too, 'cause there's no taxes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's better than actually employing a fractional attorney, like employing them. Yeah. So there's an explanation since they're an employee. I mean, they might gel with that.
That has been an effective pitch. I think the variation that I put it is, if I told you you could hire a head of HR, general counsel, and an associate for, X dollars total, wouldn't that sound nice type of situation? It's like 50,000, it's like 70,000, whatever it might be. I mean, there's general counsels alone where their package, when you factor in base salary, bonus, business expenses, payroll taxes, I mean, it's nowhere close. Now, again, maybe that's a full time person, but even if you divide that by three, it's still nowhere close. And then when you factor in the employment issues, so like from a head of HR or chief people officer perspective,
Right.
that actually has resonated, and that has been one of the more effective ways to frame this, both with current and prospective clients.
What I wonder about with the institutional clients is, are they still expecting to see how you're spending all your time?
No, it's a great question. I would say they probably are, because to Damien's point, and he uses, the house line a lot, and sometimes the house wins, sometimes the house doesn't win. Everyone is always looking to make sure they get a value. And I remember having lunch with an attorney who has been doing subscription model for a very long time. And he said that the subscription model is a great way to hide your hourly rate. And it was very interesting because at the time I didn't quite understand what he meant. I, of course, like any good litigator or lawyer, smiled and pretended like I knew exactly what he was talking about. But this is a safe space. I had no idea. I now understand much more what he's saying in terms of make justifying the spend. because whether they want to know how you're spending the time, if the monthly amount is a good deal for them, at the end of the day, while we may not be using a billable hour for the subscription models, it's so ingrained in the culture of legal professionals. They're going to be measuring it against, all right, I could either go with Weinstein and Klein at this, or I could do something else. So they definitely are wondering how you're valuing the time. And that's why, again, another reason why the summary I think is so effective. We had the conversation about send an invoice, and there's no winning with the invoice. If you send an invoice and they get the better value, the incremental joy that they will receive is nothing. But if you send an invoice where they lose, you better believe they're going to be thinking about how we can renegotiate the terms of this deal so that doesn't happen again. So there's no winning there. The summary is a great way of conveying value without breaking it down into some binary win-lose perspective.
Yeah. So right now, how are you? I 100% agree. That's why I also don't track my time. So if you think like that's a weird way to put it, like it's a way to hide your billable hour, but or whatever exactly he said, because when I give a CLE on like the Gen AI efficiencies, like you're looking at billable rates of $25,000 an hour if you get something done in a minute. That used to take a long time. So you might run into ethical quandaries, like professional, like rules of conduct,
Mhm.
ethical quandaries. If you're thinking about your billable rate being worth $25,000 an hour, it's probably no governing body for lawyers, be it bar association, Supreme Court, what have you, would probably approve of that as a
Right.
reasonable fee, right? So I'd be careful with that line of thinking, but sort of, I guess, the spirit of like what the intent maybe behind it is appreciable. And I want to
Here's
know.
where it helps that we're not at $25,000 naturally, and comparable firms are much lower. And so when I say hiding it, what I think he meant is we're not talking about hiding between, $500 an hour and $5,000 an hour. It's more like the difference between $500 an hour and $800 an hour or something to that effect. And so the monthly subscription amount is going to be something where if it was on the lower end of that spectrum, the client may be saying, you're not, how are you going to get 20 hours of work a month? Because if I do 500 times 20, that's much lower than, or much lower than what that monthly is. But if it's at a slightly higher amount, the incremental changes of 10 hours, 15 hours, 20 hours, whatever it is, that allows you to justify the monthly subscription a little bit better because the hourly rate is hidden.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a little bit. I still think there's diminishing returns long term with the efficiencies that are currently present and on the horizon. I do think that if I could get something done like next day for a client, and maybe in the past, it would have taken a really long time to get it done, but they need to move at the pace of business and the nature of what you're doing. Like business needs to move. Like in particular, your side of it, Damien, too, with the deal being the deal lawyer. Like if the deal gets done faster, that's you want to talk about showing them ROI.
Oh
Like
yeah.
Brian, to your point, like
Mhm.
you could show them because we got this deal done because I turned like these red lines around in 24, 48 hours every time, and it would take their lawyer 2 weeks. If I took 2 weeks every time for red lines, this deal wouldn't have gotten done. Look at how much revenue you generated
Right.
from this deal because I turned it around in 24 to 48 hours. That's probably hundreds of thousands, or if it's a larger company, millions. And I'm only a few grand a month. You know, and I didn't take that long. I could have taken a lot longer on those red lines, right? So I think for that type of stuff, and this doesn't work for every practice area, right? This doesn't work for immigration. This doesn't work for family law. It doesn't work for certain practice areas. But for being a deal lawyer in particular, you got your ROI right there.
Oh yeah. I mean, our clients know that and we know too that there's a value to the time, to the quick turnaround, right? That's nobody ever says it that way, and I like the way you teed it up. But there is, if you were to ask a client, you can spend X and get it in 2 weeks, or you can spend 2X and get it in 48 hours. Not everyone, but I can tell you that a lot of our clients, especially in the deals, would spend a little bit more to get the turnaround. And we're mindful of that, right? And that's part of the value is, we want to be and we need to be so responsive, generally speaking. That's just our style, but especially with these types of clients because they really are treating us as the lawyers down the hall, right? The general counsel, we're just fractional, we're outside of the four corners of the office, but it's the same concept. You need a quick answer, right? You need a quick turnaround. You need a quick review of that NDA before it goes out. Sometimes 48 hours is too much, make it 4 or 5 hours and the client's wowed. And sure, I mean, you turned it around in a quick period of time, but the client's not thinking, oh, did that take him 20 minutes or an hour or whatever it was? Client's just thinking, I just got this back in no time. That's amazing.
Yeah. So some things I want to highlight because we're speaking of time, we're running low on it, and I want to be respectful of yours. You said you're talking about it with your clients, and not enough lawyers are doing that
Yeah.
about like what would work for them, in particular if you're trying to transition. And Damien, you and I talked about this in our pre-show call, but I think some like giving them a deadline or burning the boats, it's saying, okay, starting in not 2025 because it's too soon, but like maybe starting in 2026, all of our things are going to be on subscription. And you could join early. And if you do, you get a discount. You get to lock in at that earlier rate, right? And starting in 2026, we're moving to subscription. This will be our price for your level, for your needs. And, that might go up if your needs go up, at the beginning of next year, but it's going to be in this range. And just let them know, here's 365 days, that you get with us. That if you still want to bill hours or we can lock you in for a year, 2 years, scope it, right? You got to scope it. And if the
Yeah.
scope goes up, then the price goes up, but they still have the savings or whatever it is. And then that's how you transition them, right? Like any business making a pivot. Jaguar is not going to be selling combustible vehicles anymore. They're making a full pivot. And you know what
Yep.
that's also maybe going to do? It's kind of going to make people buy a bunch of, combustible engine
Mm.
Jaguars, right? Now they're going to be collectibles. So I don't know if there's a direct analogy with
The
legal services.
Weinstein Klein collectible billable hour.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They're going to,
Oh,
they're going
okay.
to do all the billable hours they can. You
Bring
might.
that invoice.
Right, right. I mean, something there. There's maybe something there. So that's something to think about, for something for me to leave you with. I like time flew. Like any other questions, tech questions, anything like I'm here.
So I feel like we need to come back on here and go 12 rounds on whether to track time or not. With respect to that, I know, and it sounds like you mentioned already a bunch of the reasons why we do that, at least for now. With respect to completely abolishing tracking time, how do you gauge when to increase rates? How do you gauge when something is a loser or a winner? Look, I'll go back to those binary
Yeah.
terms.
So even though I don't track my time, I control my time like crazy, right? This was booked with a Calendly link, right? My clients only have access to schedule 15 minutes at a time on my calendar. If there's a big deal coming up, or if I'm helping them with a transaction or whatever the thing is, I'll send them a 30-minute link or an hour-long link. The hour-long links are super rare because realistically, like it's all asynchronous, right? The vast majority of the work. So I really control my time. I also leveraging the automations in Calendly, and I have been drinking from my Calendly connectors cup today. So they're not a sponsor of the show, but they
I
send me
was gonna
swag.
say we got to change that or
They
something. Come on, Calendly.
they send me swag because I talk about them all the time. So I build in automations where I get automatic buffer time. And so even though I control my time, I'm also magnanimous with my time because I want my clients to be happy. And so it's like even when this call is over, I have 30 minutes blocked in case I wanted to
Mhm.
produce the episode right away, right? So I have time to go over if we had to go over or whatever, right? So like I do that with everything. And then I block my time. I'm going to spend 30 minutes working on this contract. I'm going to, this attorney and I need to talk, about this deal. So I'm going to block an hour maybe if it's a big deal, for that type of a conversation to go over a bunch of red lines. So, and speed up the process because I'm incentivized to just go over red lines on the phone because it actually gets things done faster sometimes. So things like that. So I'm still controlling my time. So if I really wanted to look back, I could probably guesstimate how many like hours I spent
Mhm.
on something, but I've never had to do that in 3 years of not billing time at all. Uh, and so remind me of the second part of your question there because I was getting to it and I just lost myself.
When do you or when is it a time for you to increase? Like,
Oh, yeah. Yep.
what's the time to increase rates?
So I track projects and I don't think about winners or losers. But I mean, it's never really one page. A 2-page non-disclosure agreement, that's a project. A 20-page master services agreement, that's a project. Because realistically, that MSA is going to carry over for 2 to 3 months. Realistically, going back and forth. If it's a long enough, complicated enough contract that's going to establish a multi-year term, right? So and that counts against their project limit for those 3 months. If they have 10 projects, they've got 9 as long as that one continues on for those 3 months, right? So it always counts against. So that's a way that it sort of balances itself out. Is the bigger projects, they take more time, and that's gonna go for more than just a month. An NDA, I mean, I could get that turned around so quick, right? And that's a project, that counts as a project. Sending out a cease and desist letter, super easy. Update it, send the attachment, like, so there are little projects and there are big projects, but as far as how many projects a month they get, they all go towards that. So I have a la carte pricing where it's $50 a page.
Hmm.
And that's if clients are testing me out, they get $50 a page. They learned very quickly that if they just pay me per project, they're gonna win out a huge amount,
Sure.
right? Huge.
Yeah.
Like, they win every time when they stop paying me per page, which is also how I
Hmm.
keep my fees ethical. Like, that's if I ever was asked about it, I'd say, "Oh my gosh, they are getting an amazing deal." You wanna see how many
Right.
hundreds of pages these were? If I were to charge them per page? So I do have a counting metric that I do fall back to, I suppose, a little bit, but it's not time, it's page. And if they go over if they go over their project limit, I could charge them $50 per page. But today, to and I are talking about earlier, I keep them subscribed. And so I just say, oh, extra project or two, it's not a big deal. Now, if it's an extra master services agreement or severance agreement or something, maybe it's a different story. But but if they go over for 2 or 3 months in terms of projects, I say, really, you're not a 10 project client, you're a 15 project client.
Right.
And that's how and we have that, and they say, "Oh, yeah," 'cause, even 'cause I'm giving them updates, so totally, yes, 100, yeah, because 'cause they're getting the value. They know they're getting the value, and so it's a much easier conversation to have. I've had clients say to me, after 1 month of that happening, "Hey, I know we went over, maybe I should pay you more per month," because they're getting that much value, and I've never imagined that would ever happen, that clients have said they need to pay me more money, and they do, and I let them, obviously.
So the concept is still there of I need something to track in order to gauge whether or not I'm making a good deal or bad deal. But it sounds like what I'm hearing is why use something as complicated as, hundreds of entries a month as opposed to 10 to 20 projects a month.
Yeah,
You should
yeah.
do this for a living. It's pretty good.
Well, so it just jump it in there, and I know we're at the end, but maybe we do have to a part two at some point, because I'm going to drop a bomb on you with this too. I mean, what we're talking about is track your time hourly, or point ones or whatever it is that your firm does. You're talking about tracking it with projects and tracking also capping it with projects, which is really smart. We have obviously, our offering for subscriptions is different price levels depending on the complexity of the client, right? Depending on a lot of different factors. Specific things are carved out of that, right? So M&A work, litigation work, audit defense work. But other than those few things, we don't really cap the time, right? So there's could be scenarios where a client has, 150 hours of work for us in any given month. And we've dollar for dollar priced it out at as if they would only have 30 hours for us per month. And it is interesting because we haven't we haven't had that yet. We've had clients certainly go over, and quite frankly, most clients, when you look at the work that's done, they are saving money on the subscription model, especially once you kind of bring it out over 4, 5, 6 months, something like that. But it is interesting for you to cap it at and projects, which I do like, because what we have seen, and I'm sure you've seen this too, is that most people who do subscription, they have their different tiers. This one's 5 hours a month. This one's 10 hours a month. That one's 20 hours a month. But there is some sort of cap on it before you kind of get pushed or elevated into the next tier.
Well, I will say there, if you're doing subscription for prepaid hours, that's not a subscription model and still subject,
Yeah.
just for educational purposes, I'm saying this, to all the ethical requirements of billing time. So you definitely don't want to do that. That's not a subscription model. That's prepaid hours, and you got to refund for every single second that they don't get. And so I do not recommend that because it's not that you don't get any of the benefits of the subscription model, and you still have to track all your time. So I definitely
Oh,
wouldn't
yeah.
do that. And I've talked to some lawyers who do that, and I try to get them off of that right away. What I'd say for the other work, like this, you're excluding M&A, you're excluding some things. You could have a subscription add-on for that. I
Yeah.
do. So you do a subscription as soon as that letter of intent gets signed, subscription add-on kicks in until closing, subscription add-on comes off, right? Or like 30 days, 60 days after the closing if there's money in escrow, and depending, a lot of it depends. But you could price around it. I have a client who he likes to buy a business or two a year. and then he runs them and he hires people to manage them and stuff, right? And so I give him a monthly subscription that incorporates. I have a custom pricing for him, incorporates 1 to 2 transactions a year. We're assuming, there was once a third one, whatever. Great client. And I'm his fractional GC for when those things happen in those businesses or to avoid things, right? So like I just give him a custom price for that because I know he's going to be acquiring stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
pretty down market, right? We're talking less than, million, sometimes less than $500,000 deals, right? So they're not complicated. There's not a lot of due diligence. And so I've priced it accordingly. So you could do it. You have enough experience that you both could do it. I'm going to have you both back for sure. We're at time, so we'll just wrap it up with where people can find you, and if they have any questions, or LinkedIn or socials or the website and all that. Remember, it's mostly a lawyer audience. You never know, a client might be listening.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. Yeah, so again, the firm is Weinstein Klein. We're based out of New Jersey, working with clients mostly in New York and New Jersey. Our website, weinsteinklein.com. That's WEINSTEINKLEIN. We're pretty active on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter as well. And we've got a couple cool newsletters if people want to subscribe. We have a business law newsletter, we have an employment law newsletter. We take our approach to it, which is a little lighthearted. We have some fun with it, and we found that people like that. So feel free to subscribe to that for sure. It's about once a month we send out an invite, or a newsletter rather.
We've been told it's the funniest labor and employment newsletter in the entire country. So if you like dry wit, puns, and a not so serious approach to the law, click that subscribe button.
And on that note, if you got to run, but we like to ask a fun question at the end of the podcast. Brian, we'll start with you, and then Damien, you give us your answer. And that is a hot dog a sandwich, and why?
You're asking actually a person that has actually had to deal with this question during COVID. We represent a lot of restaurants, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, but some restaurants with liquor licenses, depending on your license, you have restrictions with what you can and cannot serve. A lot of restaurants and bars were getting hit hard during the pandemic. And one of our clients, in an effort to try to raise money, was figuring out how they could sell food to raise additional funds while still being in compliance with their liquor license. And so I had a legitimate research project and several conferences about whether a Hot Pocket is a sandwich and whether we could sell Hot Pockets and still be within our restriction of not selling sandwiches. We all came to the conclusion that a Hot Pocket is not a sandwich because it is enclosed, and there's some concept of a sandwich being 2 pieces of bread that's slapped together. And so along those lines, you didn't think you were going to get this detailed of an answer, did you, Matt? So along those lines, I'm going to say that a hot dog is a sandwich because it has that concept of 2 pieces of bread with a protein slapped in between it. And that's my answer.
I'll be much shorter. It's bread and meat, baby. It's a sandwich.
So, I mean, that
We'll come
shorter
back, we
answer.
promise.
Brian, to be fair, I almost thought you would land in the other direction of that because it's mostly enclosed. Is what I thought you were gonna. Is not, so you surprised me, and that's why I love the question. Well, all right, so we'll have you back, but we'll sign off. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank
you
you
so much for having us.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Make someone's day by sharing this episode with them. The best way to get in touch is to follow and message me on LinkedIn. To get extra content, subscribe to the newsletter at www.lawsubscribe.com, where you can also become a paid subscriber to get episodes and content early. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.